Mondo and Boxer went downtown to hit the nightclubs and hang out with nice girls. They met lots of them. College girls from San Francisco, Fresno, Modesto, all over, sidled up to Mondo and clung to him. He had to lose them in the crowds so he could meet new ones. Fresh out of YA, he was incredibly buff, and he went shirtless for most of the week's constant parties. Oh my goodness. Come on, man. On the way out of town, they got stuck in traffic, and he noticed a lovely Mexican girl riding with her friends in a convertible. On an impulse and feeling full of himself, he jumped from Boxer's car and into hers. She laughed and said her name was Flor. The cars pulled over at a gas station, and Mondo posed with the beauty for Boxer's lens. Flor told him she was going to her mom's house, and Mondo teased her, said he wanted to meet her mother. He wanted to thank the woman for bringing such a beautiful girl into this world. Flor laughed again and handed him her phone number. He must have got like 17 numbers from females that weekend. His pockets were stuffed with the paper scraps when he got home. But he never had the chance to call any of them because all those messed up things went down in Chinatown. Pam Ham was the first to come back into court. She was an attractive woman who looked like one of those Law and Order prosecutors in a suit, pencil skirt, and razor sleek hair. She hoisted herself on top of the prosecutor's table, crossing her legs at the ankles and swinging them. "You want to know my answer to gangs?" she said to the small crowd gathering in the courtroom. "Send all the problem kids to Salinas away to a military-style boot camp." Suave and his lawyer followed. All rose for the judge. Suave had cut a deal. 20 years straight for conspiracy. No life on the back. It wasn't bad. Whether Suave did his time in California or federal prison would depend on what happened with the Black Widow case in San Francisco. Mondo squinted as he recognized the weight of what had just transpired. He was alone now, completely on his own. If Suave got 20, there was no way Mondo was getting 15. As the last defendant, the trigger man, he would face life. The law had no clause allowing for the fact that if he'd said no to killing Raymond Sanchez, the gang would have disposed of him as surely as they disposed of another man named Sanchez, his good friend Vincent, who was whacked on Pacheco Pass for failing to follow orders. It was the nature of power. The law said Mondo was the one who in the final seconds chose to pull the trigger and end a life. Even if he didn't agree with it, Hatcher admitted it was a compelling argument. The prosecutors had Mondo nailed, and yet he would not agree to the DA's offer of 29 to life with no right to appeal. Hatcher shook his head in disbelief. Or was it an aspiration? The court adjourned at 9 a.m. Hatcher walked into the hall and fell onto a wooden bench, his weight rocking it. People said these were the same worn benches upon which Cesar Chavez and his followers rested when the labor leader faced a judge during the lettuce strike. They said Cesar gave up his seat to the elder campesinos and sat on the floor. Hatcher gazed at the sky through a tall window. This was his spot for thinking. Mondo's dream of exposing Lizard's role in the murder was shot. Suave was the last defendant who personally worked under the informant, which in legal terms meant Suave's presence as a defendant was required to force Lizard to take the witness stand. The FBI informant could no longer be ordered to testify, not at Mondo's trial anyway. Like Mondo, Hatcher wondered why Suave had been treated so well back there. All along, he wondered how the guy managed to score one of the best lawyers in Monterey County for free. Too many coincidences, he thought. It was obvious to him the feds would do whatever it took to keep Lizard off the stand. Suave's attorney emerged from the courtroom with a jubilant smile, and Hatcher's face felt like a deflating balloon. That night, Mondo called his father from the jail. Should he take the deal, risk a trial? Big Mondo didn't answer right away. He believed the jury would hang his son. Gang members were getting 100 years or more in Monterey County, and those kids weren't caught on video like Mondo. But if he took the deal, he could never appeal on any grounds, guaranteeing he'd be down for life with only a slim shot at parole. Big Mondo told his son he must pray and make his own decision. Of late, Big Mondo had found great comfort in religion, and he attended the same East Side church as others stepping back from the cause, including the legendary Pocky and his wife Lisa. God was the only thing that made sense, and God was Big Mondo's only solace after he finally realized he led his son in the wrong direction. Faith had come gradually. Big Mondo's first spiritual inkling was in 1984 when he served time in Soledad on a murder conspiracy. Several NF members were trying to pull him in. He wasn't really interested in joining, but that didn't mean he wasn't down for the cause 24/7. The homeboys asked him to perform a task after a newcomer arrived in their part of the prison. The mark was a black man who'd accidentally landed in the Norteño yard. Big Mondo's assignment was to hit him. He made himself muster all the evil in his heart, which wasn't hard because he harbored lots of evil back then. His plan was to win the man's trust and then thrust a shank in his gut. He approached a stranger in his cell with a smile, coffee and cookies. The man smiled back. Big Mondo was about to say something friendly, but the man chimed in first. "Jesus loves you," he shouted. Big Mondo fell back as if he had been knocked in the head. It was the last thing he'd expected to hear in prison. Shaken, he offered the treats and left, unable to do the job. That night in his cell, he wondered how Jesus would possibly love him. He'd caused nothing but harm in this world. He wanted to be loved so bad, he'd ask God to show himself. When it did not immediately happen, a sorrow swept through his heart, so fierce he sobbed and heaved silently in his bunk. Soon after, an old friend asked if he was ready to become a carnal. Big Mondo said no. He respected the cause, but he would not join a group that put itself above his family. The friend said he understood. By the time his son was arrested for the Raymond Sanchez murder, Big Mondo made sure to get picked up on a parole violation so he could join Little Mondo in jail. His son was looking at a whole lot of time, and these might be their last days together. At first, Big Mondo told himself he went in to make sure nobody from the Sanchez family or the NF tried to get at his boy, but really, he just wanted Little Mondo to know he was not alone. Father and son convinced the guards to let them cell up together. Big Mondo lay in the bottom bunk every night and prayed his son would not hear him cry. He tried to save his tears for the shower, where no one saw how he wept for all the ways he let his boy down. He was ripped by a sorrow like none he'd known, and it was there that Big Mondo turned himself over to the Lord and promised to raise his grandson the way he should have raised his boy. After he was released, Big Mondo did not attend Little Mondo's court appearances, partly because he had a job and partly because the Sanchez family might show up and things could get ugly. And maybe too, because he could not bear to witness his son awaiting fate in silent, solitary agony. His son was a man now, and he had to find his own destiny. He reminded his son to pray over his decision, and he and Mondo hung up the phones. But Mondo did not pray that night. Alone with his choice, he made up his mind without God's help. In the morning, Hatcher paused in the hall before entering court. He looked haggard, beaten. He said hello to a reporter, but didn't turn to face her. 2 years of motion, strategies, hearings, and fights, he said. And here it was. Maybe it ain't so bad. He stared through his favorite window at the going-ons 3 stories below and kept talking, needing to purge himself of all the wrong with the justice system and the world. They can't keep packing the prisons forever. Someday they're going to have to parole, he said. He watched as deputies in the courtyard stood guard before the deteriorating hulk of the old jail cell where Ethel Kennedy and Coretta King held their candles for Cesar Chavez. Hatcher saw defendants and lawyers scurry toward the steps where President Clinton once promised the people of Salinas this violence would end. Beyond his view were the city hall steps where Mueller swore the same thing, and a block from there stood the sorry edifice of Cap Saloon. He emitted a breathy sound that was either a sigh or a symptom of his straining heart. We can't just keep locking them up and throwing away the keys. I won't be around to see it, he said. But when he's up for parole, maybe we'll have learned something by then. He turned from the window and entered the courtroom, where he sat at Mondo's side in the jury box. The prosecutors filed in and stood at their table in front of Judge Duffy. The Sanchez family watched from the audience. It was time. Mondo and Hatcher rose. Pam Ham's veteran co-counsel, Chuck Olvis, held a document in his hands, preparing to read aloud. Olvis was the DA's top gang expert and the best in the business. The man had the rugged face of a general who'd witnessed too much combat, and he put so many young men away for life that one court reporter joked that he had 8 children for breakfast. On this morning, Olvis read with his usual hound dog expression that appeared wistful no matter the occasion. Armando Frias, Ovis said, freely admitted he was guilty of acts of street terrorism and had committed murder and attempted murder. These acts were committed on behalf of and for the benefit of the Nuestra Familia criminal organization, Ovis said. Mondo displayed a somber face appropriate for a funeral. The Sanchez family stared, but he resisted the temptation to mad dog back. A bailiff uncuffed Mondo's right wrist. Hatcher had to hold the clipboard while Mondo signed the plea agreement because his left hand remained cuffed to the belly chain. Judge Duffy announced that he'd formally be sentenced in 2 months. A lone bailiff escorted him through the back of the courtroom. Their footsteps grew quiet, and then they were gone. The Sanchez family left the room through the front door. Among the entourage was Raymond's father, a graying man whose weighted features spoke of a pain no parent should know. In the jail, Norteño inmates stared through a glass partition as Mondo returned. That guy's no good, one shouted. He's a dropout. He's fucking no good. It didn't matter that Mondo had believed in the Norteño's cause more than any of them, that he'd been willing to kill or die or do life in prison for it. It didn't matter that the prosecutor had just declared he'd kill for the benefit of the Nuestra Familia. None of these sacrifices mattered anymore. Yeah, I see him right now through the glass, wearing a blue shirt, one Norteño inmate yelled. Why he's wearing a blue shirt? It was too bad, the homeboy said, that the jail separated the dropouts from the actives. Just too damn bad. Hatcher drove to a beach on the Monterey Peninsula. He always felt called to the ocean after the heavy cases. He didn't feel too good about what had happened in there. After 2 years, Hatcher had come to like Mondo. Perhaps because the kid was trained so well by his gang, Mondo had an inner strength that was rare in a young client. The kid didn't act all sorry for himself or bitch about his fate. Despite all the bad things the boy had done, and there were plenty, Hatcher believed in his gut and in his heart that this kid really truly never had a chance. Since the day Mondo was born, too many forces had shaped and molded and pushed him until the boy could become nothing more than what he was, a killing machine, yes, but also cannon fodder. This was one of the hard ones, Hatcher told himself. He stared but didn't really see the waves, seabirds, tourists, the slanting light of early evening.